There It Is a family company, and what we do is we do gender reveals. So we try to find really fun ways for people to celebrate the growth of their family. I know that's so hard, especially nowadays. People are working and going through a lot of diverse obstacles through that process. And when it comes to fruition and there is a potential growth of the family, people love to celebrate. And
Oh yeah,
it's
totally.
such a photographic experience. So we want to make that as memorable as we can for people, give them different options that they can customize it to meet their needs and especially for their situation.
What are your like main products?
Um, Anything with confetti, powder, and streamers. So whether that's
Nice.
coming from a balloon or from a baseball exploding with that stuff in it, or shooting it up in the air with cannons, people just love the eruption of color in a very dramatic moment.
Yeah, totally.
So I'm curious, how do you get into like the first prototype and even get into the idea of doing it? What was where did that all stem from?
Well, I was back in the day. I was working for Stryker, so working 14-hour days, and we were going to have our first gender reveal. And there was nothing out there. So I'm living on Pinterest,
Right.
and we did the what would it be theme. So I'm cutting out like bees and drawing, and there was just nothing out there to purchase. And so we had this great event. We went to Party City, and we had my mother-in-law go in to get the balloons. They couldn't even give her a black bag to walk out with the blue balloons for our boy, because it was against their store policy to put balloons in a black bag. I guess it was a choking hazard or something. So my
Interesting.
mother-in-law walks out and pretty much ruins the surprise for us. And we're like,
Oh,
well, it was a special moment because we're all in
yeah,
the car anyways. But still, it was like, why was it so difficult, right? Why
yeah.
am I up till like 2 in the morning cutting these things out? And why could we not make this, a seamless process just to
Mhm.
celebrate? And so we experienced that, and then my, my sister-in-law and brother-in-law wanted to have a gender reveal like 4 or 5 months later, and they're like, "Hey, we saw you guys had one. Like, what should we do?" And it came about that we should do something themed based off of his profession, and he's a professional baseball player. So it ended up that he used a baseball that he hit and it exploded blue, and we're all there, and it was a great celebration. It was actually they did it um, while I was playing softball in the field next door. So Freddie's over on a softball field
Nice.
hitting this, and it's going viral the next day. It's on Good Morning America, ESPN.
Oh
Everyone's
my goodness.
losing their mind. Chelsea's wearing this beautiful dress, and everyone's like, "Where did we get these?"
Yeah.
All this stuff, and we just had our firstborn, and we're like, well, Tori, that's my wife's name. Instead of going back into hard money lending, let's open up an Etsy store selling these. And maybe you don't have to go back to work and you can stay at home and feel comfortable, spending time
Wow.
with our boy and our family.
And
And
you at
so we
this point, you're
started.
just thinking it's like a side thing.
Yeah, so you
Oh,
almost did
yeah.
that as like a, hey, my
Yeah,
my
like a
my
craft
sister and
store, yeah.
brother-in-law thought this was cool, so I helped them out. I'm playing softball in the other field.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
smacks this ball and it goes viral. And the next day you're like, oh my gosh, we have a business opportunity here. Let's reconsider our path
Well,
and take a step.
it didn't even sound like it was that in depth, like business, like you were starting a business. It sounded like you just opened an Etsy store,
Yeah,
which people
yes.
do that on the side all the time. My sister and I tried, we failed, but yeah.
No, no, no. And what's funny is we kind of, like you said, we just lucked into it. It was, we picked a lifestyle that we wanted and we said, hey,
Yeah.
this could meet that. Right. And then, so, and where other people were like, oh, I want to make a business and I want to be a millionaire and all this other stuff. We just said, no, our goal is our lifestyle.
Yeah.
This is perfect. That would fit within that. And I remember what I've learned is, between the book, The Lean Startup and the J Curve and the Startup J Curve, was you start with MVP, like a minimal viable product, right? And we
Mhm.
had that. And we didn't necessarily just go like straight to China and mass produce these.
Yeah.
We said, oh, what can we do? We can buy like ornaments, clear ornaments on Amazon, and we can buy some powder from this, organic holy powder. store, and we can have it shipped to the house. We'll glue it together on the dining room table, and then we'll ship them out, and we'll spray paint them in the backyard.
So you just
And
got your
so,
Oh
own
yeah, because
manufacturing.
well,
Yeah.
and I was gonna ask you about that. Like you said, he hit a baseball. Like, what was the material made out of? And did you have to kind of figure out, okay, am I paper macheing a ball and then drawing, making it look like it wasn't an actual baseball, obviously, because you can't
yeah,
make those explode, right?
yeah. My actually my father-in-law was the genius that came up with the original concept, and so it's just an acrylic shell, an ornament, shell that people put like Christmas decorations in, and they hang it on their tree.
Yeah.
And then you just fill it with powder, glue it. I think the original that Freddie used wasn't even glued closed, so he had to hold it. And
No way.
you
That's
fill it.
funny.
Yeah, yeah, it could have all been ruined
That's
Yeah.
a
if
lot of
Kelsey
pressure,
dropped
right?
it.
Yeah. Right.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, but luckily Freddie could have hit anything that
He's the right
Kelsey
guy.
threw at him, right? And so, but that fits in the principle that you start small and you put out a product, and then you get feedback right away. And Etsy took down a lot of barriers to entry to go to the final consumer in a very packaged platform. And that was perfect for us. And my
Yeah.
wife was able to sit at home and on her phone and answer people's questions and start that feedback loop of what people want in their experience of what the product that we were making and how it was being sold. And that really equipped us to continue the adventure, right? So we weren't bogged down with manufacturing and large numbers.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of barriers to that entry, and it was very scalable for what we were doing. So we said, hey, let's try new things. So we made a golf ball, and Dustin Johnson used that. And we made a football, and Kirk Cousins used that. And we just said, okay, what can we keep on
Mhm.
doing that
Yeah.
people would like? And then we did smoke bombs, and then we did like little pushers, and then we had cannons, and they really didn't take off at first, the confetti cannons. And we said, this is crazy. This is growing so fast. So then we started to say, how can we produce more? And we went to my parents' house, and we took their garage and creating drip dry stations to paint these
Oh
things
my
because I couldn't spray
gosh.
paint anymore. Yeah, yeah. I'm paying them rent to rent out their garage because, in South
That's
Florida, like getting
hilarious.
a warehouse is like impossible. So yeah, we worked out of their garage and their my childhood bedroom. They let us make balls in, and we have this amazing picture of Tori and I wearing like a mask while she's pregnant. With we're because we're gluing balls and breathing in,
Yeah.
dyed
Right.
cornstarch, and we're just like living the dream, right? And people say, oh wow, like you guys just lucked into that, right? And what's so funny is, and you probably deal with this a lot when you're talking to entrepreneurs, they say, well, once I get a good nest egg, I'm going to start a business. Or when I
Yeah.
get some money set aside, I'm going to start a business. And we had none of that. We just had a baby. I just quit my striker job to
Mhm.
work at ADP so I could have a 9 to 5 job so I could still be there and be engaged with my new wife and our boy. And so the only way we could run this business wasn't to leave my 9 to 5, right? And not have health insurance and all that stuff. It
Yeah.
was waking up at 6 in the morning and working till 9, going into work. And then when work was out, hit the gym and then start working again at 6 o'clock at night till 9 o'clock at night. And with my parents babysitting the boys while Tori and I are in there gluing balls together. And that was a sacrifice we did. And it wasn't like we did that for a week or two. We opened in at the end of April, and we did that until December 29th.
Oh wow.
So yeah, so we did it for over half a year of this,
Yeah.
working hard. And what we saw, and we were able to save up a lot of money. We paid off all our debt,
Yeah.
and we said, all right, we need enough money to live for a year if this business fails. And so we saved up that money while working the 9 to 5 job and doing it in addition to that with our limited skill set. And we're learning a lot along the way. And then we said, well, what is quality of life to us, right? Isn't that what got us into this? And it wasn't location, it wasn't South Florida. We needed more space. So we moved up to Georgia where we could get a 4,000 square foot house for the price of our 1,100 square foot,
Yeah.
condo down in South Florida. and an unfinished basement where we could, make all this stuff in our basement. It was
There's
like
your new warehouse,
amazing.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
yeah.
Wait,
So,
so what, John, what year is this? And you're still working, or do you quit, January? You said you worked up into December. And did you quit
yeah, yeah,
Strike or ADP or whatever you're working like, and then just start Poof 100%? And what
yeah.
year was that?
That was 2016. So it
Perfect.
was funny. My boss came in and I said, "Hey, I'm going to put in my 2 week notice, right? Because it's Christmas
Mhm.
and the New Year." And it was funny. It was like corporate America. She said, "Oh, well, you need to go talk to her boss." And they had HR on the line. They asked me to leave right there on the spot, right? Because
Wait,
I was
why?
um, because they don't need a 2 week notice in sales.
Got
They're
it.
like, "Well,
Yeah.
we're not going to just
Right.
pay you." And I'm like, "Well, I would like to do my 2 weeks." And they made it really weird. And so, unfortunately, we did not have health insurance as we were making this transfer from
Oh,
them
man.
because
Yeah.
they didn't do the 2 weeks. They said, "No, today will be the last day, and you're totally fine." And it just reinforced that I chose to be an employee for those companies. And when you're an entrepreneur, you get to make those choices that control your family and the security that you have. And a lot of people think, oh, it's so unsecure. But no, you get to make those choices because even when you do work for these, Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies, there's still, you're not in control of a lot of the aspects of your life.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so that was just, as we were making this transition, it was just, this is the last example of, hey, keep on going because you're headed
Yeah.
in the right direction because you're in a situation that you're not in control of for your family and your
Totally.
life. So I
I
thought that
think
was
that
really
too.
encouraging.
Sorry, I think that too is interesting because I think from the outside looking in, especially those who work in that corporate America, being the entrepreneur and saying, I'm not working for the man anymore. I'm going to make those decisions is very appealing. But when push comes to shove, and obviously you guys are equipped to do it, I think it scares a lot of people too, where it's like, oh my gosh, I don't have those benefits anymore. I don't have that 401k
Yeah.
anymore. I don't have the medical. And all of a sudden it kind of weeds the true entrepreneurial spirit out to those who think it's just an easier lifestyle. And I'm glad you shared kind of the origins of what you guys did because you were working that 9 to 5 and then you were starting another process, another company afterwards. Right. And that's what
Yeah.
it takes. It's not common to just have the capital and the
Yeah.
financial stability just to stop everything you're doing and focus on one thing at a time. So talk to us if you can about shelf space in the brick and mortars and any opportunities you may have had in that regard with some of the big players that you either seized an opportunity, you walked away from an opportunity, and kind of how you've gone about that with your company.
Yeah, I'm super curious if you like had, hey, we got to go sell this to Target or something like that too.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So we were the biggest name in gender reveals at that time, and that's not saying much, right? There wasn't a lot of names, and companies such as Party City approached us, and at first I thought it was just like a scam, and then but it's like at partycity.com, and one of
Yeah.
their purchasers were reaching out to us, and they wanted to get into the gender reveal space, and at this time we were working out of the basement still, and we were in North Georgia and just grinding, right? And we were experiencing people stealing from us, and we thought, okay, maybe this is our out, right? This is our big sell off point. This is our big contract where we're not playing and fighting all these games. And they were talking in scale that was just blowing my mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was still painting these things in the basement and stringing them up and spray painting in the backyard. It was hilarious. And they're
How many were
talking,
you like talking to us about numbers? Like, so you're making how many a year? Like balls, and they wanted to
oh,
make X amount times that.
well, I think, yeah, monetarily we were doing about $1 million on average a year in sales, right? One to
Okay.
Yep.
1.5 million. And they were coming in and wanted to do a $10 million contract.
So
So
10 times.
10
You're like,
times that.
okay, that's a lot of balls we got to paint.
Yeah, exactly. And so we started dabbling because we weren't outsourcing any of the manufacturing. We were just buying raw materials and assembling them ourselves, right? Because that's what's so wonderful about Etsy is it gives the handmade players a space to
Yeah.
perform in. And so we were looking at scaling this and $10 million, and man, that sounds amazing. We talked about how much that would cost to fulfill that order, right? Because they have 800 licensed stores, like 200 non-licensed stores, and then there's this other party company that has about like 400 stores that competes with them. Then they were talking to us about being in all their stores,
Wow.
and they were use a warehouse distributor, so we would have to stock all their stores with one restock in all their warehouses so that it wasn't there was no backlog, right? So that they could refill their shelves as needed. And it was just amazing. But we had a lot of the analytics that people wanted pink and blue. And when we were going through the contract with their lawyers, they had like, well, if you don't meet this certain threshold, right, we have the right to null and void the contract. And I go, so what does that mean? They're like,
Yeah.
let's follow
Here's
this
the red
out.
tape. Let's listen. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, well, I know that if someone walked in the store, this is going to be great. People want this in brick and mortar so they can go pick last minute, don't have to worry about shipping
Yeah.
and planning ahead. People want to celebrate that weekend if they found out, say, that Friday. But they're going to buy a pink and a blue and then go to the doctor. The doctor's going to give them the one they're supposed to use, or a friend will, and then they'll return the other one. So we knew
Yeah.
our return rates based off how we were selling them at that time would have been astronomically high, right? And so we were selling one pink, one blue, and we're like, we run the risk of all of our products violating this return clause. And they said, well, if that happens, you will be responsible for taking all the product off all of our stores all across the country, or you can pay us to destroy your product
Oh my God.
plus all of our warehouse. And it would violate that $10 million contract
You're
based
like,
off
I
what
thought
it
this
sold.
was going to be easier.
Right.
Yeah. And it was a question. It was like, wow, we're making a good living. And we go back to that fundamental principle of what is the quality of life that we want to have, right?
Yeah.
Because now I'm going to have to travel overseas and oversee the production of this stuff and the packaging and all that fun stuff, and not work on the branding and taking photos in our front yard, right? And building this little family brand that we had. And I'd have to be away. My wife just gave birth to our second child. And so we had two boys, two babies at home under the age of, I mean, they're Irish twins, so they're 11 months apart.
Yeah.
So they're both under the age of 2. And we
You're a
said,
little busy on the
Yeah.
family side. Yeah.
yeah. So what is our goal? Our goal was to be a family unit, have time, have flexibility, right? This was all inspired by, you remember that book by Tim Ferriss, The 4 Hour Work Week,
Yeah.
right? We're
I've heard
working.
of it.
Yeah.
So
If it's an
So
that's what it
audio
was.
book, Hope will know it. But if you have to
Yeah,
turn pages, she won't.
that's
oh yeah,
true.
it was
I love
I'm
way
the
a
same
good,
back.
way though.
I
I think
love
I
a good
read.
audio. Yeah. This is
I
why we're in podcasting though. Okay. So I can just play it while I'm driving.
definitely. Well, yeah. So Tim Ferriss wrote that back when you know, Crushing It came out, and Rich Dad Poor Dad was an important one.
I've read
And
that one.
okay, yeah. So yeah, I think I have, yeah, Crushing It. It was that was our goal, right? We haven't got there because we're still working hard, but at least we're at home. At least we're spending a lot of time. We're in control of our life, and we're getting to choose our battles, right? And it was so much fun learning that, with my wife and going through that and finding out what encouraged us and what fueled us, right? And manufacturing wasn't our forte, right? That wasn't what encouraged us and fueled us and had fun. We loved creating content. We loved creating new products. We loved seeing amazing gender reveals and the reactions and the impact we were having. So we said, is this why we're in business? Is this our option? Well, I don't think that's going to meet our needs, but that's an emotional response. I have to say, well, what's the financial aspect? And
Yeah.
then we'd be cannibalizing our own business that we've built in order to fulfill a contract that could put us under, right? And you hear that a lot about businesses is they scale too fast. They weren't at that inflection point of that J curve. So I remember I read the book, The Startup J Curve, or I didn't read it. I listened to it because I'm much like you. And
See,
I pressure
see,
washed the driveway. I listened to
yeah,
it like in the middle of the day, and I went out there for 5 hours and pressure washed the driveway and listened to this book. And what I learned was we weren't at that inflection point to scale at that point. We haven't mastered the production. We hadn't insulated ourselves,
yeah.
you know, in the manner that we could have done something that would have seriously jeopardized our business. So at that time, we said no to Party City, and
So you walked away from 10 million.
yeah. And it was funny because we went in the stores, when we were out and about, and we were like, oh, let's go over to Party City and see how their gender reveal, aisle is growing.
They have a whole like aisle
Yeah.
of that type of stuff now.
Oh yeah, and they
It's
wanted to
yeah,
build us out one of those kiosks like in the middle of
yeah,
the aisle. They wanted to give us a whole one there, and we were measuring the box sizes and how many we could fit on each one. And we could
yeah,
have, because at that time the big sellers were baseballs, golf balls, footballs, basketballs, and soccer balls. So it would have been one on each tier. And we were measuring out the space. And it's funny, I just spoke with some people regarding, getting into retail, right? And I told them about this experience we had, and he told me I was thinking about it 100% wrong. And
Oh,
I
really?
said,
Really?
Wait, sorry. This happened a couple years ago, the Party City thing. But
Party City,
recently,
yeah.
you're
Yeah,
thinking about getting back into the retail, and this guy that you were talking to said you were thinking about it wrong.
completely wrong. And you got to love hearing that. And so
Yeah,
he
right?
said, I told him about the return rate. And I said, that was a big issue for us. He goes, then sell it as a combo, a pink and a blue. So they can't
Oh,
return it.
you're like, "Good point."
I was like, that makes sense because, we were thinking, because we dealt with a lot of customers, and financially, it was expensive for people to buy both. But at this point, we could scale and production costs, we had minimized that we could offer that. So we
You guys
weren't
managed.
ready back then to do that because our production costs were too high, right? 3 million to fill a 10 million order,
Yeah,
just on production alone doesn't necessarily make sense. But when it's $1
That's
million
all
dollars,
timing too, right? Like you
yeah,
yeah,
you alluded to that, and I agree. I think there's something to be said about that philosophy of sometimes your best deal is the one you walk away from.
yeah,
And based off of the timing of where you were at, I would agree with the decision you made. Now,
yeah,
since then, if you scale to an ability where you can have the pink and the blue incorporated and your price point is there where your consumer's willing to pay it, then of course it's a different conversation. But um, those are all interesting, and it's applicable to all industries in some
yeah,
capacity. So um,
no, I
really
think
interesting.
well, that happened in 2018. Then they came back to us in 2020, right before COVID, and we were emailing, and we were ready to fulfill the order with Party City. We were
Yeah,
saying, okay, we're ready to be in there, and then COVID happened, and they put everything on pause, and
yeah,
then that whole process happened. So now in 2022, I'm sitting down talking with someone, hey, who has beard oils in Walmart, and they're expanding their product, and they're absolutely crushing it. And he said you got to think about it differently. There's cash flow, there's your business, but then what's your exit strategy? And I said, oh, my exit strategy is, well, if say I make $1 million a year, it's it's 4 to 6 times, my cash flow. Someone will just pay me that. And he goes, no, that's not the whole picture. And I'm like, all right, elaborate. And he goes, you want to sort of lock down these contracts and get in these retail stores because the people that are going to buy your company isn't someone that's necessarily going to have the same goals as you. They're going to want to own that shelf space on, say,
right.
Walmart, Party City, and whatnot. And he goes, if you had one of those built out kiosks in an aisle, people want your kiosk. They don't want Tori and Jon. They don't want Poof There It Is. They want that kiosk. So you
oh, that's
look on,
interesting.
yeah. So if you go down and you look at, something on a shelf, the people that will buy that company is the people on the left and the right?
Huh,
Because they want to own that as
yeah,
well. And then he said the difference when you're selling online, Jon, you have a customer coming, every couple minutes, and you're selling to that person. Now, when you're in retail, you get the contract. It's normally you're locked in for like that first 3 years and it renews every year after that. And he goes, you're selling once a year. And as long as you're one step ahead every year, you're going to continue that contract. And so
Yeah.
you're doing your online sales to get that quick analytics and make those changes so that when it comes up to renew your in store contracts, you're ready to do that and you own that space, that real estate. And so it just blew my mind that that was the reason you go into retail. It's not to say, oh, I'm going to up my cash flow, lower my profit margins, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
still going to make more money. No,
Yeah.
it's to diversify your portfolio and the people that are willing to buy your business.
That's interesting.
So you've done a great job. You're almost reading my mind because that was my next question for you in
Yeah.
terms of we're here present day, next, 2 to 5 years. What does that exit strategy look like if there is one? It sounds like part of this is what you just alluded to and kind of getting the space on the retail side. But is there any way, can you elaborate more on kind of what your plan is and where you see the company going?
Yeah. So the way we've survived over so we've been in business about 6 years. So the first 2 years was creating a constant upward trajectory. Then competitors broke into the space. Then there was seasonality, which we got to experience. We went from the biggest dog in the space to now one of that. We are more the premium brand. We found our niche within our own space. And we have survived by constantly innovating on our ideas and slowly rolling them out, right?
Yeah.
And that takes time and energy in creating those concepts. And what we found is Tori and I really love creating something, and we've learned a
Mhm.
lot through this whole process. I think you said you listened to that book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and the main principle of that entire book was building yourself as an asset, right?
Yeah.
Um, and we talked earlier about the Undoing Project and right how our gut necessarily always isn't the best guide. But you listen to Gary Vaynerchuk now with Crushing It, and if you have a finely tuned gut, then you listen to your gut. But if you're
Yeah.
just going off an emotional response, that's not necessarily it. So we've built ourselves as assets. We understand social media now. We understand the marketing platforms. We understand international production and distribution. Um, those are things that can apply to any industry.
Yeah.
So, where before we're saying this is a great lifestyle company, right? And I say lifestyle company because this will allow our family to live well for the rest of our lives if we wanted to and stay within this. But we found what we absolutely love doing, right? Now, is there another industry that's breaking out that we can sort of do this at a larger scale and take the skills we like and sort of only live in that space and still remain profitable and not worry about production or
Yeah.
shipping products and all that stuff? And so that's why we're kind of looking now. And then we look at that exit strategy, right? So, how can we exit out of a company that we built, we learned so much from, that has built us to who we are, and how do we find something more profitable for the future that will meet our needs in the next stage? Now we're up to 4 children,
Yeah.
and our
Is
goals have
4 it? Are you done at 4 or are you going to keep going? You're almost at a full roster.
Well, the funny thing about Jon is that you're in gender reveal and you have 4 boys.
I
You
know,
never
it's like
got
a
that pink.
self-serving company.
Yeah. No. Yeah. You're like,
yes.
dang it, we got to keep going until we get that
Every
pink. No, I'm just
every
kidding.
time we had a gender reveal, it's like, all right, here's we
Yeah. Yeah. You
filmed
never
it. It's
got it.
on YouTube. It was always
Yeah.
like, all right, are we working or are we having fun? Are we
Yeah.
doing a little bit of both?
Wait. So, Jon, let me clarify what you were saying. So, you're saying you've learned all these skill sets. You want to come up, potentially get into another arena utilizing those skill sets. And then once you kind of settle in, do you, in that, let's say that, starts to sustain itself, that, business B or business two,
Yeah.
then would you sell off Poof? Would you just assess it? Would you keep both? Like, what is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So what we found is we scaled. We had a lot of people contributing to the company at one point, and it was really daunting and it was not enjoyable. And so this is ready to grow and ready to scale. So we got to just set it up to where it starts hitting that inflection point, and then we can hand it off to someone that can fulfill those large contracts and loves going overseas and managing the production,
Right.
the packaging,
So you're saying you would sell it potentially?
we would definitely
Love
offload
to.
it. I'm
I mean,
sure they want to keep me on board to
yeah.
Yeah.
drive that, but if it doesn't get to that point, it has the potential, and that's where I was sort of meeting with people to say, what is the potential here? And
Yeah.
he said,
You need
you
to
need,
know what you're getting into.
yeah,
Yeah.
he said, you built this. You need to show good sales on your online platforms. You need to have your own brand, your own domain. You need to sell in your own store. You also need to secure some of those contracts to be in retail as well. And that is when you can then say, okay, what kind of buyers are out there that want to take over this, um, and continue to grow that, because
Yeah.
that's not necessarily our goal. Because everyone, I remember when I was in sales and I was in business sales for AT&T, that was my first job out of college. I'd always say, oh, we're going to come in here and we're going to help you grow. And not everyone wants to grow. A lot of people want to actually work less and increase profits, right? That's the real
Mhm.
goal. Not let's grow for the sake of growth, because there's marginal rate of return, right? And managing people and all those middlemen, it becomes very daunting. So I don't see this business being able to grow in the way it can with the resources and the goals that we have here in our family business.
Yeah.
But we've definitely learned a lot. It's definitely applicable to a lot of industries. And that's why when you talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, once they've actually done it and they're no longer the entrepreneur that you run into, like Tori's talking,
Entrepreneur.
yeah, then you
Yeah.
kind of say, where can I apply these same skill sets in a breaking out industry? And you talk to a lot
Yeah.
of entrepreneurs, and it's like, oh yeah, that was my first company, my third company, my fourth company. That was my third one that totally failed, and this is what
Yeah.
I learned
Right.
from it. And
They all say that.
yeah, yeah,
So
they
this is sorry, go for it.
no, definitely. So it's not necessarily, people always want to say, and especially with us with gender reveals, they say, wow, if I would have came up with that idea in 2016, I'd be, living the high life as well. And it's like, no, we had there was an opportunity, right?
Yeah.
And then we took that opportunity and we continued to battle through it. I read this book by Ryan Holiday, The Obstacle's the Way. And it was so impactful because so many people want to say, I'm going to work really hard and then I will be happy when I retire, or I will be. And what they have actually found is overcoming obstacles in your daily life is what brings meaning and purpose to a lot of people and actually encourages them. And so when we took that mindset and said, we're going to find purpose in our day to day rather than that end goal, it turned our business into something that when these lawsuits or
Yeah.
copyright infringement or people are stealing pictures, the harder it is and the more barriers to entry, that means the less people are going to do it. So it's
Yeah.
actually encouraging as we're going through these obstacles, knowing that that's going to prevent others from breaking into this space. And the more we have to do, and the more we have to overcome, in the speed in which we can do it based off our knowledge, it's sort of solidifying our business, and protecting us in that way. So
Yeah.
that was
Yep.
really interesting.
Thanks for listening to House of Business Podcast. Make sure to tune back in on Thursday to hear what the house has to say. And for more content, find us on YouTube.